If you want to get in a place of receiving, you have to suspend your certainty. An interpretation is, in a way, a certainty about something. Interpretation says, I'm certain that this is the case. No interpretation can touch the rawness of experiencing. All that's happening here in this experience is just this seamless influx of raw data. Nothing changes what you are. Anything that's illusion cannot stand. And anything that's true just stands without effort. So all one really needs to do is just not give weight to thought. And don't let them become interpretation. And even if you do, nothing changes. You are just simply experiencing the rawness of interpretation. And that's what's realized in quote-unquote enlightenment. It just gets more and more simple. More and more simple. It's not the presence of a new interpretation, it's the absence of an interpretation. So enlightenment is anti-doing, anti-interpretation. Even the thing that you're using as a spiritual way to transcend your experience is not it. Even the interpreter is realized as an interpretation in itself. Even the one saying this is all unity, even that, it's not even that. It's like there's a movement from an imposition. So where I was imposing something on reality and saying, you are this, you are non-duality, you are peace, you are to this receptive state where there's a pure receiving of whatever reality is appearing to be, whether that's unity or not unity, or multiplicity and non-multiplicity, suffering or not suffering, peace, anger, whatever. It's like reality is telling me what it is, instead of me imposing an interpretation on reality. So, let your mind get noisy. Who cares? Who cares? You're going to cause yourself so much grief trying not to think. Like, that's what a mind is. There's not some thing called a mind that does thought. The mind is thought. It is interpretation. That's what it is. You are independently of thought. Independently of thought, you are. Whether you have thoughts or not, you are. Whatever thoughts you have, you are. There's this isness, this vibrancy, this aliveness, this awareness, the consciousness that is not affected by thought. So it's the idea is really to live in the spirit of this raw experiencing. Be in the spirit of raw experiencing. Don't believe that you need to add something to your experience. And that makes experience very simple. The realization that reality doesn't need to show up as something. This certainty that we have is out of the realm of mind. It's not the mind's certainty, like I'm certain, meaning I know for sure. This is a certainty in not knowing, a certainty of uncertainty.
You're listening to the Nonduality Podcast. This is Nic Higham from thewholenessofexperience.com. Joining me for this episode is Colette Davie, whose Instagram handle is thatbeyondduality. I think I quote this from Nisargadatta almost every episode. I am that, he says, just live your life as it comes, but alertly, watchfully, allowing everything to happen as it happens, doing the natural things the natural way, suffering, rejoicing as life brings. And the strange paradox in this is that when you don't resist suffering, it's not suffering. It's seen as simply another flavor of reality, here to be experienced, here to be known in a new way, intuiting the rawness of experience. So in a way, it's no longer suffering. If you are experiencing something, then reality is saying yes to it automatically. whatever you're experiencing now, whatever the flavor of reality is in this present moment, presence is saying yes. So can we live life as it comes, knowing yourself effortlessly as the wakefulness, as the alertness, you could say, as the watchfulness. You are the witnessing and the witnessed. So there's no resistance in that sense. There's an unconditional, effortless yes. You are the experience and the experiencing. The root meaning of the word experience is test, experiment. We're always experimenting. This is the space where we explore ourselves, where we test out different ways of being, different modes. As far as I can tell, the purpose of life is to experience, is to explore. So you're always integrating, you're always deepening automatically because you are aware, because you are experiencing, because you are awake, you're already awake as life. You are therefore integrating, you're re-knowing yourself this way, this way, this way, this way. There's a sort of celebration happening, a sort of celebration of being. And then you might ask, well, how do I stop these thoughts? How do I stop interpretation? How do I stop the meaning-making mind? Where's the off button so I can just experience in this pure way, in this enlightened way? Well, pure experiencing is always happening because the interpretations mean nothing. They're just interpretations, which are just other facets of reality. They're not in the way of anything. They're not obscuring anything. They're just different flavors of life. So this is pure experiencing. Your present experience is pure experiencing already. And if it feels like there is someone resisting, then you are experiencing a resistive person. But it's an experience. It's a story. It's a movie. So pure experiencing is already happening. You don't have to get to a point where you're just like a blank space of knowing. You don't have to erase the person. There is no person. If you experience a person, then that's simply an experience made of knowing, made of whatever you wish to call it, awareness. Everything is made of that. There's only that. All you know is knowing. All you experience is experiencing. This is just life celebrating itself. So this is the enlightened view, because you are the enlightening, illuminating, animating reality that you're seeking. You are reality seeking itself, seemingly overlooking yourself, but that's impossible because there's only reality, isn't there? There's only reality. How many realities are there? How many realities can you find now? There's this reality. Life is saying yes to your present experience, no matter the flavor.
It's truly the biggest paradox, because, when you say, when we say don't interpret or drop interpretations, that doesn't even mean drop thoughts that tell you reality is something or, it's not something. We can have an unpleasant experience and we can interpret that as, oh, this is terrible. That's an interpretation. We can also interpret it as, oh, this is unity. This is fine. I can handle anything. And regardless of those two, whichever you choose, nothing changes what you are. No interpretation can touch the rawness of experience. It doesn't mean that I'm not thinking, oh, this is bad, or oh, this is good, or I wish this hadn't happened, or I hope this goes a certain way. That's not even related. Thought is not interpretation. They're not like the same thing. They're not the same thing. Somehow interpretation, or similar to belief, has an energy which seems to contract one around something. So you can have the experience of interpreting something as bad whilst not being contracted around it. Or you can have the experience interpreting something as like really spiritual, and like, wow, this is so united, and simultaneously you can feel contracted, which really proves that our, what we call interpretation, never had a role in this anyway. It was always just this like pure processing. Like, of course, there's still thought here that says all kinds of things, but somehow the belief in the spiritual thought, or the energy that attached itself to spiritual thought, has dissipated, but yet thought remains. So all one really needs to do is just not give weight to thought. Allow thoughts to happen like sounds, and don't let them become interpretation. And even if you do, nothing changes. You are just simply experiencing the rawness of interpretation. That's the rawness of interpretation. If you can also experience the rawness of non-interpretation, which is what I was talking about. Or you can experience the rawness of interpreting, the rawness of belief, the rawness of experiencing you're a separate person, the rawness of feeling small. All of these are enlightened. And that's what's realized in quote unquote enlightenment. It just gets more and more simple. More and more simple. We have to unlearn. We move in reverse. Progress in reverse. And that's also why we say there's no progress. Because enlightenment is anti-progress. It's anti-movement. It's anti-interpretation. It's not the presence of a new interpretation. It's the absence of an interpretation. So, if you remove interpretation and not thought, whatever it is that's holding you to a belief, if that can somehow be removed, and I don't mean like by willingly like sitting down, get out, come on, stop believing. Somehow by grace, if that energy can be dismembered, then you can just have pure interpretation without belief or without that energy around it. So enlightenment is anti-doing, anti-interpretation, like matter and antimatter. Enlightenment is like anti-thinging, anti-ising, anti-movement. Just the realization that you never had to move, the realization that you never had to interpret this as enlightened or one. Like I never had to do any of the things. I never had to impose something onto spirituality. I mean, I never had to impose spirituality onto what is. Because what is has never been spiritual. That was just like a thorn to remove a thorn. And then you remove the thorn. Like you said, you're never not pure experiencing. It's just not possible. And I know that when people hear this, there's a part of them that goes, oh, but I don't feel, and then they hear us say you're never not experiencing, and they shut that thought down. They go, no, don't be here. In an attempt to ignore the mind, or in an attempt to, to stop believing that thought. And that only sometimes works. It does not always work. So if you feel yourself like squashing down a belief that says, like, I feel separate, or a belief that says I'm a person, and you feel contracted around that, and it makes you feel bad to do that, then rather let that belief come up and let it shine full force so that it can expose itself and you can see through it even easier. If you let a belief come to the forefront, or an interpretation come to the forefront instead of pushing it down, it's easier to see the cracks. Like if you scrumple up a white cloth, it just looks like solid white cloth. But if you let the white cloth expand, you can start to see the holes in the cloth. And the same thing with interpretation. If you squash it down, if you believe, I shouldn't be interpreting this about life, that will never get seen through like the cloth. You'll never see through the holes in the cloth. It'll just forever be a nagging voice that says, I'm separate. And you go, no, not you. You just let these thoughts rise up. Everybody gets the thought, I feel so upset by that person right now. Or I feel so angry. Or why did I do that to them? These thoughts are not to be squashed. They're to be embraced, brought up into the light and seen through. Like, how can you see something through if you don't see it in full? If you never bring up the thought that says, I'm so mad at him, how are you ever going to see that there's no you and no him? So when we say like, don't interpret, don't squash. It's the anti-action. So release the instinct to squash it and simply look at it for what it is. And then you'll see, oh, that was a thought. That was never an interpretation. It was a thought. So much of my path was mental gymnastics. There's a deepening here every day, but it's not in the mental realm. So much of what I was doing was resistance. I was, at the very beginning of my path, I was choosing a state. I was tuning into a frequency that I wanted to feel in order to avoid feeling whatever was present at the time. So right now, what I've now realized is all that's happening here in this experience is just a seamless influx of raw data, and it's not being interpreted in any way anymore. It's not coming in and saying like, oh, this stress is unpleasant. I need to realize what I am. The mental realm has ceased, and yet still there is something here. So there's now this fresh recognition. We begin slowly sort of getting rid of interpretations more and more until apparently even the interpreter is realized as an interpretation in itself. Even the one saying this is all unity, even that. It's not even that. Even the thing that you're using as a spiritual way to transcend your experience is not it. So your one's lack of interpretation or your disregard of interpretation just gets more and more subtle, gets more and more meta. Our disregarding of interpretation begins very gross. Disregard the concept I'm the body, or disregard the interpretation. Disregard the interpretation that this is a solid desk, and then disregard the interpretation of anything at the end, or maybe not end, since it's never ending, never over. That's not what's meant here. Now this mind only does the functions that it was meant to do. It only thinks about what it's going to cook for dinner, and it wonders what to plan for the day, but never does it say, hey, you are this, or hey, change your experience. In fact, it goes completely silent. When there's suffering, it's actually quite quiet. It's open and receptive. And I was telling my husband last night, it's like there's a movement from an imposition. So where I was imposing something on reality and saying, you are this, you are non-duality, you are peace, you are to this receptive state where there's a pure receiving of whatever reality is appearing to be, whether that's unity or not unity, or multiplicity and non-multiplicity. suffering or not suffering, peace, anger, whatever. It's like reality is telling me what it is, instead of me imposing an interpretation on reality.
Yeah, no interpretation can touch the rawness of experience. The word interpretation means to explain, to expound, to understand. The word translation means to turn from one language to another. To turn from one language to another. What's the original language? When you interpret what you experience, you're simply explaining, you're describing, you're making up a story about what you're experiencing. Kids do this, and adults are just big kids. What's the difference? There's no difference. It's not like you get to a point in adulthood where you start telling the truth. Like, all kids lie. All kids play make-believe. So do adults. Like, this is make-believe. Because no word, no interpretation, no translation can capture the actual reality of this present experience. This is why it's always said these are pointers, because there's an acknowledgement, there's a recognition that words are just pointers. What's the original language? What's the original meaning of what we call apple? So we say apple. That's an English word. What's the original word for apple? Well, of course, there is no original word. So what is it? Well, it can't be said. The word apple simply points to the apparition of life, the expression of life we call apple. So to translate is to turn from one language to another. Whatever the first language was pointing to the indescribable. So there's a recognition here that no interpretation, no word, no translation, no story can capture reality. No interpretation can touch the rawness of experience. So there's always pure processing going on. There's always just the, indescribable, unthinkable, inexplicable actuality of reality appearing this way and this way and this way and this way. Just appearances. So thoughts can happen. Well, those thoughts are just signposts to, they're just pointers to. Interpretations don't have to stop. Just recognize them as interpretations. And if you don't recognize them as interpretations and you're convinced, then that's just an interpretation, isn't it? Reality simply can't be captured, but it will continue trying to capture itself. Why? Well, who knows why? Maybe for the fun of it. Maybe for the enjoyment of it. Maybe for the celebration of it. Maybe for the artistry of it. The creativity, the self-love reality has for itself. Yeah, so reality has no fundamental meaning. And this is not about, as I said, it's not about getting to a point where you don't apply meaning. Meanings are applied, but they're recognized as stories. Really, those stories, those thoughts are spontaneous, aren't they? They're effortlessly here. In a way, you're not even involved in the creation of thoughts. You're always witnessing thought. The sound of this voice may as well be a thought. What's the difference? These words are spontaneous. The words you're hearing are spontaneously heard, spontaneously appearing in your experience. Just like thoughts, there's no difference. It's absolutely no difference. It's not like these words are impersonal and your thoughts are personal. What's the difference? These words are heard in the same space as thoughts, aren't they? They're heard through the same awareness as thoughts are heard. This is not about not thinking. It really is not about not thinking. It's not about the purity of silence and fighting the noise of thinking. Life is just balanced. It's just a balance of everything. It's just a balance of this play of duality. Yin yang, yang yin, yin yang, and yang yin. It's just a perfect perfect balance of the seemingly opposing forces of yin yang, but they're not opposed. They're complementary, actually. Up makes down, down makes up, left makes right, right makes left. So this is not about not thinking, and it's not about not doing. Like, it's more about recognizing that doing happens, like thought happens. It's all spontaneous arising, that's all. And if you don't recognize that, then that's okay too. It's still the same show. Whether you're experiencing it through enlightened eyes or personal eyes, personal egoic eyes, it's all the same show. So this is not about not doing. It's not about not thinking. You can, and this is totally optional, you can recognize the spontaneity of every arising. Whatever you're experiencing is exactly what you, reality, want to experience. I'm not talking about the person when I say you want to experience your present experience. You are reality, and whatever you're experiencing right now is what you have chosen. Reality is the only chooser. Reality is the only doer. And you are that.
Yeah. You say it's not about not thinking. And that's such a common trap. Like, how do I stop thinking? How do I stop thought? And I remember when I first started really kind of trying to wake up, and I was doing like neti and stuff. This was about like probably 3 or 4 years ago. I remember I started and I was like, this can't be that hard. Okay, so thoughts, I hear that they're not me. Okay, I can do this. I started to get these thoughts, as everybody does, like, whatever thought arose, and I decided that whatever thought is grounded in what I call separation at the time, I'm gonna be like, no, that's not true, and I don't know what I thought. I thought I was doing something, but so a thought would arise that goes like, I'm hungry, and I would go, who are you? And I'd like say no, basically, to the thought, or like correct it, and then eventually it got to a point, like I think like 4 to 5 days into this practice, and I was sitting in the bath and my head was just going, but you, and it was the most noisy my mind has ever been, like trying to fight with thought. Like, I got to get out the bath. Who's got to get out the bath? I got to pick my clothes. Who cares about how you look? Who is this that you're trying to make look nice with clothes? and it's just like the most busy my mind has ever been was when I was trying to stop thought from happening. What actually happened was I was like, holy shit, this is chaos in here. This is not keeping quiet for even 1 second. And because it was so noisy, I was like, wow, but something is quiet. And it was only through that, through the absolute fucking chaos that was going on inside, and then something clicked. Oh shit, I'm unmoving. Throughout thought, I am unmoving. There's all this chaos that's going, but somehow my perceiving of it is still stable. The chaos has not influenced the awareness of it. And so I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Of course, I continued to fight with thought because at the time I didn't know any better. I just thought, okay, it's amping up before it dies down, because you hear that too, like the ego is going to fight back. So I'm thinking, oh, my mind is so busy because ego is fighting back or whatever. So I continue with this thought battle, and the louder my mind got, the more I retreated away from it and started resting in that which is aware of the thought. And you can't, when I say resting in, you can't really rest in awareness. It's more of like a noticing. I'm aware of this fight going on in mind, and the more I noticed, I'm aware of this, the more the thoughts began to quiet down. And they carried on the momentum for a couple of days, and they're still fighting. And eventually I was sitting and I was like, wow, this is continuing. They're still fighting with one another, but the reins are off. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing this fighting. I'm not correcting. And then at first I thought, oh, it's habit. It's doing it by itself now because I've been doing it for so long. Just like the non-dual realization just escaping me that I'm not my thoughts. But anyway, so I thought there's a habit that's been created. And as the chaos continued, the more I abided as just knowingly aware of it, the more they began to settle down more and more and more and more. And although I didn't realize at the time I'm not my thought then yet, there was a distance because I was like, hey, I can just sit back and watch. So the realization hadn't hit that these aren't true yet. I still very much believed the thoughts that were arising. I still very much believed that I should impose spiritual thoughts over these non-spiritual thoughts. That continued, but yet I could just remain in this position that sort of watched them happen like a movie. And this is like very important, that position. And we often just bash the witness position on here, but with thought, I would almost say that you can't really do much more than that. That's the main practice when you're dealing with thought, because it's not like with sensation. With sensation, we can go in, right? Because a sensation lingers, it's got a form. A thought is a sentence, it's a sound. We can't really go into a thought. So that's why we just choose to witness the thought. And that's what I suggest. You can, of course, go into the thought, for example, the thought, I am unworthy. But then what you're actually doing is you're going into a feeling. You're not actually going into a thought. So you're going into the feeling that the thought, I am unworthy, gives you. But thought in itself really, truly should just be left alone. It should just be left alone. There's no thought ever worthy of your attention. And as a concession, one could say maybe the occasional non-dual thought that would help you to progress in some way or help you to realize something. But for the most part, thoughts that come from the belief in you being a separate thing are not worth any of your attention. Actually, worth all of your attention, but none of your investment. So, let your mind get noisy. Who cares? Who cares? You're going to cause yourself so much grief trying not to think. Like, that's what a mind is. There's not some thing called a mind that does thought. The mind is thought. It is interpretation. That's what it is. There are not two things here. We just have thought happening and processing, if you include like other mental processes, which are kind of similar to thought. But there's no like mind. You can't destroy mind or quiet mind. John Burney said, you might as well give the mind something to chew on. And that's what breathing focus does. When we say meditate, focus on the breath, you're not getting rid of thought. You're just shifting mind's focus. You're not getting rid of mind. You're just shifting its focus from thought to something else. And all of this is not an attempt to stop thought. It's just an attempt to make you realize you are independently of thought. Independently of thought, you are. Whether you have thoughts or not, you are. Whatever thoughts you have, you are. There's this isness, this vibrancy, this aliveness, this awareness, the consciousness that is not affected by thought. And it doesn't matter what thought you have. Even if a thought makes you feel bad, that aliveness is aware of the thought making you feel bad. And it's non-moving. And so you should really just let mind do whatever it wants. Just if you let it fight with itself, that's fine. You don't even need to stop that. Like what I did, I just let mind fight with mind for days until something clicked. Oh, there's something unmoving here. But if you like resist it, if you try stop thinking, if you try any type of stopping actually, if you just try suppress or squash your experience in any way, it's just a waste of your energy and a waste of your time. So it's the idea is really to like live in the spirit of this raw experiencing. So when we talk about raw experiencing, ask like, how can I live in the spirit of this? That's a much better inquiry than the instruction, hey, live with a raw experience. Because when you feel something and you ask yourself, how can I approach this raw? You will automatically know what's raw and what's not raw, so to speak. You will know what the bare bone experience of this is versus what thought is putting onto it. And even thought is included in the raw experience. So it's just like maintain the spirit of the raw experience. Be in the spirit of raw experiencing, whatever that means to you. For me, it means I don't add something to myself. So whatever I'm going through right now, I don't need to add anything. And that's kind of it's not even a mantra anymore. It used to be, but now it's just automatic. So, if you begin, you can begin with a mantra like, I am full and I am complete and I don't need to add anything to myself. And if that's part of your experience, if you're adding stuff already, that's just your experience. Don't add to that. That's all. Don't add to the adding. So just take your experience as it is and call that raw, and just experience it in full. And don't add. Don't add stuff unnecessarily. Don't fuel a fire. Don't that I read somewhere that, I don't know if I've mentioned it on a previous podcast or not, but it was something like the duration of a human emotion, if felt naturally, only lasts something like, it was either 60 or 120 seconds or something. And when I read that, I couldn't believe it, because man, we can go on forever. we can really, like, if we get hurt, we can really feel that and loop on it. We can. And when I was really young, I was like probably like 4 or 5. My sister and I would get into a fight. We used to fight like cat and dog. And my dad would sit us down to meditate, and we'd just be crying. Oh, she did this. And my dad would let us cry for a little bit. And then he would say, hey, don't loop. So what that meant was don't add. He was telling us not to catalyze the experience. Don't, once your emotions settle down after that like 60 or 120 seconds, once the emotion has been felt, don't go and bring thought back and say, oh, but she did this, and then you re-feel all of that again. So that's what he meant by don't loop. Don't add. Don't believe that you need to add something to your experience. And that makes experience very simple. Now, if one gets upset, it's just like, I'm just upset. That means I don't need to add more upset, firstly. That's the ego's first instinct. It just wants to be more. And we think that the ego just wants to be more enlightened or gain more stuff, but it also works with suffering. It wants to suffer more. It wants to rethink about what hurt it and relive, re-hurt, re-loop. So, just don't add. Don't re-loop. Just whatever you're feeling in the moment, just feel that for that moment and don't add. And that means don't add a spiritual thing to it. Unless, of course, you are already doing that, then, like we said, that's part of it. But for the most part, just don't touch your experience. Just live it untouched. And that's living like the spirit of the raw non-interpretation. Just set a point for yourself where it's like, okay, now this is my cutoff point. I'm experiencing, this is my cutoff point where I'm not adding anything, and you just roll with whatever's happening up to that cutoff point. And if something happens to sneak in, all right, fine, fine. But then you cut it off again and you just feel just that. And when a thought comes in that, or an intention comes in that wants to re-loop or wants to bring you back into whatever it is that you are now coming out of, just naturally, just distance. Just distance. Just choose yourself. Just choose yourself. Just preserve yourself over what this thing wants. What this reinterpreter wants to do. Like, we definitely have choice. Even though we hear like, oh, there's no choice, blah, blah. We definitely have the option to prioritize. In a moment where something wants to overtake us, we can say no. I have felt you. I have felt you. I am full in myself right now with whatever I'm experiencing. I don't need more. I don't need more of anything. I don't need more suffering, and I don't need more enlightenment. I don't need more of anything. And if you realize that, then you'll realize that you've got more than enough to work with. You don't need any more. In fact, the less to work with, the better. That's why we always say, if you can, work on the level of sensation, because that's the easiest, because it's the least. It's very reduced. Normally when we suffer, we have this whole package going. We have sensation, feeling, thought, contraction, a whole cocktail of stuff. And eventually we reduce it down to sensation. And that's through not adding. That's really through not adding. How else do you get down to the bare minimum? You just simply let it fall away. You don't add. You don't even add an intention of, oh, I gotta let this fall away. That's more adding. So just move through, just even for a day, even for an hour, see what it does to not add anything to your current experience. And you'll see the paradox. Very quickly you'll see, oh, well how you'll get confused very fast, but that's a good thing.
Yeah. It's like, oh, the adding is happening. Oh, the automatic meaning making is happening. Oh, but I don't need to stop that. I can play with stopping it. Like, that's optional. You can play with stopping it. You can play with trying to let it fall away. Or you can recognize that it all naturally falls away. You can check this out right now. So these words are heard, and the words fall away. And it's the same with thought. It's the same with everything. As reality, you are letting it all fall away. You don't have to be a person or a spiritual seeker or whatever, an enlightened master, doing that allowing, doing that acceptance, doing that non-resistance. You're already the life that lets it all fall away, but you're also the life that creates the addition. So it's kind of like making peace with the way you already are as life. You are the adder and you are the subtractor. And this is why often we start off in the spiritual path kind of subtracting, netty, we're netty all away. Because then you can kind of see with eyes of clarity and discernment. So we start off with the inward facing path and the path of negation, the path of discrimination, the selfward facing path, exclusion, elimination. I'm not this. Because then we get to see like what we're working with, the raw, basic minimum. So what's here, and like you're saying, don't add, and then see what you're working with. See what the mind spins, like blah, 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 blah. Right, okay, let it do its thing. I'm not the thought. I'm not the mind. Go from there. Inquire. The world is unreal. The body is unreal. The mind is unreal. First of all, it unravels. The meaning making unravels and is seen in its raw form. And then it kind of spins itself back again automatically. And often there's this kind of phase where you get frustrated because it's like, oh, I saw I saw with clarity, I saw how it all was, because I kind of got to the raw basic minimum and I didn't add anything. And oh shit, the adding is happening again. It's kind of really frustrating. So I got pulled back into the ego. I forgot who I was again. It keeps happening. I go through this phase of pure experiencing, and I'm just a witness. I'm just pure subjectivity. I'm just the primary fundamental element of all experience, standing alone as pure consciousness. And then blah 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 blah, the addition, the resistance, the no happened. But then you realize, what is the point of saying no to the no? What is the point of resisting the resistance? What is the point of fearing the fear? There's no point. If only consciousness is real and the mind, which is only mental conception, still happens, then surely the mental conception is also consciousness. If only consciousness is real, and you recognize that through the rawness of experience, you recognize only consciousness is real, and then you get pulled back into the story, then surely the story is just a manifestation of consciousness. So it's not a problem. So this is why the flip side of the coin is the outward facing path of unconditional love, because you recognize there's only what you are. There's only what you are. You are the witness and the witnessing. You are the witnessing and the witnessed. You are the observer, like the observer consciousness, and what you observe. So you kind of make peace with your experience. Not as a person, not as an entity making peace. You can't be an ego. You can't be a person and live in a space of non-resistance. It's not possible. The ego, the person, the individual, by definition, says no to life. That's kind of its role. The ego says no, that's its role. That's its job. The mind interprets this ego thing, says no. It's a perfect setup, but it's an inside job. So I'm everything. I'm the things that I'm saying no to. So if I'm the things I'm saying no to, then there's no point in saying no. There's a total embrace. There's just the love of being. This is the other side of awakening. It's not just the no thingness, it's the everythingness. Like consciousness is the world. Consciousness is the objects. Consciousness is the body. Consciousness is the mind. Consciousness is the ego. Consciousness is the ego. The ego is consciousness. Gives itself permission to appear as the ego. So there's no longer a no. There's no longer a resistance. But the thing is, here's the paradox as well, that the resistance can still happen. The pattern of the habit of resisting can still happen. But there's, like you're saying, there's not that added resistance to the resistance. And this makes no sense. It's so paradoxical and it's so subtle. It has to be seen directly. It has to be recognized directly. Enlightenment is just that shift into, oh, right, yeah, I see. It's like this. This is how it is.
So today I got a message from a student, one of my students that I've been working with for a long time, maybe like 2 to 3 years. So it's been a while, and I've sort of guided him through his awakening, like from when he started to where he is now. And today he messaged me, hello Colette. In this state, I feel that I cannot say that this is body or this is not body, this is mind or this is not mind. I can't choose anything. I can only be total existence. I can't even say that mind is illusion or real. Is it right? I can't explain. I don't know anything. It looks like everything is as it is. It looks like it's not a matter of aware or unaware. Things are just happening. And when I read that, I like rejoiced, because that's a realization, and it's simply the realization of the end of realization. He said it's not a matter of aware or unaware. So it was never a matter of reality showing up as aware, or he said it's not, he can't tell if mind is illusion or real, because he's somehow broken through to the raw experience of mind. And the raw experience of mind is this paradox, that it is both real or not real, is both illusion and not. And he says everything is just happening, everything is just experience, just as it is. And that is the true depth of realization. Everything as it is. And, this is not from a guru, this is from somebody who, and he's not pretending to be anything, he's just being dead honest, as he always has. Whenever we've spoken, he's always asked, from the beginning, he used to ask me how he can stop thinking, things like that. We've come a long way. So this is an honest POV of a real realization. Everything is just as it is. This is like that full circle. The realization that reality doesn't need to show up as something. And that's the realization that I was talking about at the very beginning of this talk. Somehow something is realized within this experience here that reality does not need to show up as something. And that's why when I hear, change my state, I can easily change the way I feel. I mean, sure, but I don't feel like reality needs to do that anymore. And it's just more bare bone living. In a way, you're closer to truth when you start on the path than when you're 10 years down. Before you know anything about this stuff, you're actually closer to it, because you're very close to living the raw. You are living the raw. You're living the raw experience of life. And as soon as you find out, there's this thing called enlightenment that can give me a real raw experience of life, you begin to pursue that. And the magic of enlightenment is that it just takes you right back to where you began. And that's why we can't talk about it, because how can you talk about something that never did anything? How can you talk about something that never changed anything, like in the form realm? Everything is exactly the same, if not worse off than it was before. It's now the water bottle that's here on my table is not an enlightened water bottle. It's a water bottle.
Exactly. It is and it isn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the paradox.
It's always a both and, isn't it?
Yeah, because we don't realize that we were imposing when we were perceiving it only as this transparent, non-existent object. This isn't real, this isn't a real water bottle. We didn't realize we're actually imposing on reality a spiritual paradigm. And this realization that this, I can't tell if this is a water bottle or not. That is the true place to be. This uncertainty, you can hear in this message, he's uncertain. He's even asking me, is that right? He's uncertain. And this is where we are. We're in a realm of pure uncertainty now, where you just can't say shit. You can't say anything. You can't say anything for certain. And I can't even say, because we often say, we can say for certain that we are, right? I can't, but in truth, we can't even say for certain whether we are or whether we're not. So the idea is, as I'm sure everybody's heard before, to question and use that questioning and inquiry in order to land up at this place of uncertainty. as soon as you're in uncertainty, it's not a call to resolve, to get more certain. My husband and I were talking years ago. I was telling him something, and we were talking about the idea of confidence at the time, about how people seek validation from others to maintain their sense of confidence. And my husband said to me, well, if your confidence is dependent on other people, then that's not a real confidence. And that was years ago. And then a few nights ago, he said to me, he said, how can we know this? How can we know this? I'm just so uncertain. I'm so uncertain about all of this because I can't know it, and it makes me uneasy. And then I said, hey, remember what you told me years ago about confidence? And I said, if your certainty depends on knowing, then you have a very weak or fragile certainty. This certainty does not depend on knowing. This certainty that we have is out of the realm of mind. It's not the mind's certainty, like I'm certain, meaning I know for sure. This is a certainty in not knowing, a certainty of uncertainty, and the certainty of vulnerability. So when you're experiencing something, the rawness of it is an uncertainty. It's not this is unity squashed down. And it's not I'm so separate, believed fully. It's a raw input and an uncertainty in terms of interpretation. I don't know how to interpret this. I don't know if I'm separate or not. I don't know. And when that uncertainty is really felt and it's really embraced, then you have you really have something to work with. And that just circles back to what we were saying about interpretation. And interpretation is in a way a certainty about something. Interpretation says, I'm certain that this is the case. And interpretation can be there, but we don't need to be certain about an interpretation. We don't need to be sure that an interpretation is correct. We can just take the interpretation at face value and just okay, you say this. Great. Okay. We don't need to. It's like if someone came to you and they said, hey, the sky is purple. It's like, okay. All right. Versus, someone coming to you and saying the sky is blue. That difference. Those two things should mean the same thing. Kind of roughly an analogy. Like if you hear something like that, both of those statements should be like, I'm not sure. And that's the attitude. That's the ideal attitude, and that's also the way that you pave the way for the most receptivity, and the easiest way for true nature to communicate with you. Like I said at the beginning of the talk, if you want to get in a place of receiving, you have to suspend your certainty, because like we've said before on the podcast, true nature has the freedom to appear as any interpretation. If you interpret in a certain way, that's how reality will appear to you, because it's all just smoke and mirrors. It's just an illusion, a mirage, reflecting what you put out to it. So that's why uncertainty beams back and creates uncertainty in the environment. And as far as we know, that seems to be the threshold. That seems to be as far as we can go in terms of the mind. The mind can only get to the point of uncertainty. And of course, there's certainty about what we are in a different way. Like people who are awakened or whatever can say they know for sure that this is this, this is one. But that sure is not coming from I know for certain with my mind. If anything, it's coming from a I don't know for certain place. So it's not even a call to question. It's not even a call to question your interpretation. I mean, you can question your interpretations if you want. That's obviously a form of inquiry, but like we said, don't add fuel to an existing interpretation. Because an interpretation, like anything that's unreal, needs fuel to stand. Nothing. I remember this quote, but I don't remember who said it. Like, nothing not real ever existed, or something. It's just basically just saying that anything that's illusion cannot stand, and anything that's true just stands without effort. So belief requires energy to be upheld. Interpretation requires energy to be upheld. And when we suspend the energy, or the energy involvement, the energy added to belief, the energy added to interpretation, that's when we begin to realize, oh, I've always been this thing that's not adding energy, paradoxically. And that's what happened to me when I was talking about earlier, when I was just letting my mind fight with itself. It was like, okay, I'm not fueling it. And then the realization happened, oh, I never fueled it. I was always just this thing that could observe thought. And the same thing happens with your experience. You realize, oh, I've never been the player in this video game. I've never been the character, and it's all just happened, and it's all just happening. And somewhere along the line that distance collapses, but somehow you maintain this distance. It's just that now the duality has collapsed. You're no longer in like a witness position, but somehow there's still an uncertainty about what you are. You have kept your integrity somehow, even though you've dissolved back in. You've kept your structural integrity as this receiving, this uncertain, malleable, receiving, open mirror for whatever reality decides to show up as.
Exactly. That quote's from A Course in Miracles. It says, "Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God." Nothing real can be threatened. See, there's only the real. There's only the real. It's not like in the Matrix where Neo is unplugged from the unreal and then sort of steps into the real. You see, even the Matrix is made of the real, but the real is not the Matrix. It's like the real gives birth through mental conception to the unreal. The unreal is therefore made of the real, but the real never truly becomes the unreal because it's unreal. So the mind can spin all sorts of interpretations and convince you that those interpretations are certain, are actual, are real. And like, it's okay if that happens, because it may not feel okay, but it ultimately is okay if that happens, because those interpretations are made of the unreal and never really amount to anything. That they are the art of God. And when you recognize that they are the art of God, the creative outpouring of Shakti, then herein lies the peace of God. The peace of God is recognized through recognizing that all is God, not through trying to only experience God as some other state as opposed to the human state. The human state is only God, but God is not only the human state. And herein lies the peace of God. And it's said that A Course in Miracles can be summed up in that very simple way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. You as God, you as reality can't be threatened. There's only you. The no-thingness and the everythingness are one. So it's just this marriage of the no-thingness and the everythingness. The marriage of the real and the unreal. The real is showing itself as the unreal, never really becoming unreal. That no-thingness, that nothingness, that pure awareness is becoming, is always blossoming, is always showing itself, revealing itself. It's this revelation of being, revealing revelation. And this is the result. What we're experiencing is the result. This timeless moment is taking this shape. Pure energy, kind of concretizing itself, crystallizing itself, seemingly concealing itself. From one point of view, there's a concealment, there's a hiding. The truth is hidden through meaning making. But then again, the truth is revealing itself through meaning making. But the meaning making isn't the only way that truth is known. And ultimately, you can't not know truth because you are truth, knowing yourself. Sometimes there's untruth, sometimes there's lies. Just a shape-shifting rope that becomes a snake sometimes, but always is just rope.